How's it going, Frosty friends, and welcome to this week's tactical training camp segment, where it's all about what to do during a fight. If you're ever lost in the middle of a fight, not sure where to go, what you should be doing, what pieces of cover you should be securing, what positions are important, all that sort of stuff, then this segment is just for you. You'll want to watch this video and hopefully the other ones that are in the same playlist here. Today's topic is going to be about controlling space. Now, on the face of it, might seem like a little bit of a weird topic, right? With the exception of, towards the end game, it seems like there's plenty of space. So it's like not that really big of a deal. So, why are we talking about controlling space? It's like a nearly infinite resource. Like the map's freaking huge, right? There's room for everyone. And while it is true, to say that the map itself is large, it is not true to say that space itself is not extremely important. So, if you think about it, the more space that you give up, it means that's like more space that you're traversing and being forced to reposition without really getting to pick your locations as decisively as if you were like actually just going there by will, right? So it's like if, for example, right, like DK, there are enemies on the center there, and I got forced to like continue to keep running away from them, then, oops, ooh, that was very close. If I got forced to keep running away from them, then I would eventually, reach a point where I would be very susceptible to being third party, because I will start entering territory where my information on like who's where is old, and where I haven't really like picked the pieces of cover and the position to be like one that I know is advantageous for me and my loadout and is like going to be strong and yada yada. So definitely just from that perspective, you want to be careful about how much space you give, because the more space you give, the more it's going to cause that fight to shift, and it's actually going to make it more likely and easier for enemy squads to first of all third party you, and also just like more likely that they'll like hear the fighting in general. The other thing is that you actually, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth later on here, but you do use space as a resource. There's like very specific ways that you use it, and specific things that like having space and like, giving it up in controlled ways, like actually starts to like give you, like more options in a fight. Important options. So the primary factor that actually is like going to decide whether or not you have space under control is the relative ease or difficulty with which you can hit your shots and like with which the enemy can hit theirs. Oh, what? How did I not see her? So if you're in a situation where it's going to be very difficult for you to hit shots, but very easy for the enemy to hit shots, then in that sort of equation, it should be very clear that the enemy is going to have better control over the space. And if like vice versa is true, right? If you have perfect control, or if you have like perfect cover and the enemy can't shoot you, then wow, look at this person go. That's a nice shot. Wow, zoinks. Yeah, I can't believe that the Loba just got in on me, like without me even seeing her there. Then it would, so if you had like perfect cover and the enemy was completely unable to shoot you and you had free shots on them, like they're just like easy and they're like out in the open, completely exposed, then you would definitely like have like clear control of the space. So like situations like I guess like that like actually like are kind of closer to real in-game situations would be like being behind a rampart shield, because you can shoot through in one direction but nobody can shoot through back at you, or playing the edge of a Gibby dome because you can see through the Gibby dome and you have control of the cover and like when the peak happens. Whereas the enemy like can't, and so it's like unless you're willing to start exchanging damage, then the enemy like has like very little control over whether they can hit you or not. Now that sort of like what the extremes of like of having control and not having control, right? Like there's clearly like a spectrum in between those two situations. There are a lot of situations that are not like I got perfect cover or the enemy has perfect cover and I don't. And so like you need like sort of like a criteria to be able to tell, I guess just like roughly, it's like, do I have this space under control, right? For the more general cases of like just, where position is like a little bit more neutral. And so usually the threshold that I like use personally is like, am I able to deal equal or greater damage to the enemy before they break my armor? And if the answer to that question is no, then I'm going to evaluate the position as being not under my control. And if the answer to that question is yes, then I will evaluate that position as being under my control. So some of the things that, like, you know, contribute to that, right, are like, you know, are there multiple people shooting at me? Or, you know, how, like, what's the quality of my cover? What is... trying to think, like, what else? I mean, like... I guess, like, how many options do I have, like, when I, like, peek from, like, you know, a piece of cover or whatever, like, that sort of stuff. Those are all the things that, like, sort of, like, make it, like, that, you know, we know make shots easier or harder for an enemy to hit. So, like, with that criteria in mind, right, now, like, you have to start thinking about, like, so then how do I, like, what are some of the features, like, common features, you know, of positions that match those criteria? So, like, what the, what? My game just like, oh my fudge! Are you kidding me, Apex? You are kidding me. Like, oh my god, I'm so sorry. That's so frustrating. I like don't even get to play the game now. Yeah, see? Oh my god, you're actually kidding me. So here, like some of the common qualities, I guess, or things that you can look for, right? The signs of things that have those qualities of, you know, no, they can't do anything about it anyways. You know, of like meeting that threshold and that criteria are going to be spots that provide you with powerful lines of sight, right? So that you can see lots of places from them, but still are safe. And safety should be your primary concern, because at some point, if you think about it, like regardless of how easy your shots are on the enemy, if their shots are too easy on you and they're able to register too much damage on you, then it doesn't really matter because you're never going to get to shoot at them. Because you'll just be dead. And so some of like the common places you like want to be looking at are high ground. So that's the super obvious one. So high ground is definitely going to be one of those situations that should generally provide you with greater cover, and additionally has the added benefit of opening greater lines of sight on different pieces of cover that normally wouldn't be available if you were on a flat plane with the enemy. So definitely high ground is like going to be like one of the considerations that you're going to be looking at. Hans already hopped in, I think. Another is going to be head glitches. Head glitches, I think, as many know, very annoying to deal with and are another form of cover use that makes it extremely difficult for you to get hit, but leaves pretty much all the options open for you to hit the enemy. So, you know, that's like, again, like another scenario, another position that's going to meet that criteria of, you know, where your shots are easy and the enemy shots are very, very difficult because they can only shoot at your head. Doors are another really, really great situation, like from this perspective, because, you know, enemy has like no ability to control when the peak happens and like when they're exposed to you, and you have all the control of when you expose yourself to them. It's sort of like lowest on the list, in my mind, is going to be like half cover. And so half cover is, you know, for those of you who are not familiar like with it, it's just like pieces of cover that don't completely conceal your body. And so, like, you know, like aiming through fences I would consider to be a form of half cover. Some people may also like qualify half cover as something that's like going to like cover, like, you know, the bottom half of your body. That's like another way to like look at half cover. So it really just depends, but basically just like pieces of cover that like aren't complete. Because, you know, like they do make it more difficult for the enemy to hit you, but it's not as difficult as it could be. Those are sort of like just like the features on the map that like you should be looking for, right? Like when you're trying to figure out whether a position like helps provide you with cover or not. You may have like, you know, like just like based on like the features of the map, like a good position, but, you know, with depending on like how the enemy's counter position, you know, may reduce sort of like may change like sort of like the balance of that like equation that we mentioned of you know damage. And so one of the biggest things is actually going to be like how like enemies manipulate their sight lines. And so if they widen the angle of attack on your position, then all of a sudden, you know, this like really great piece of cover, you know, as we've like often talked about like in our cover videos, becomes one that's like not as viable. So, you know, I think like just as a general rule, when it comes to, you know, trying to, I guess, maintain the viability and control that a particular position gives you, you're going to want to try and make sure that you're keeping all enemies on one side of you. Like, you don't want to allow enemies to like encircle you, because then all of a sudden, like XYZ piece of cover becomes like completely worthless. You also are going to need, so like in the interest of like keeping all enemies on one side of you, you're going to want to make sure that you are limiting the number of unknowns that are out on the field. And so, you know, if anyone on the enemy squad is not accounted for, you don't know where they are, you don't have perfect information of where the enemies are, you should be pretty careful about how you position and continuing to try to add more space to the amount of space that your squad controls. I would say is pretty risky if that's sort of like the situation you're working with. Oh my... Grapples are killing me today. And then like, you know, as you're like reaching your position and like, you know, you're playing and you're using the whatever position you found to control space, then the big thing that you will want to watch out for when it comes to protecting that space is going to be figuring out, like, just when you've got the time, like looking around and seeing, oh, it would be really bad if someone showed up from like XYZ spot. And so identifying the points that are going to be problem points for your position. And like once you have those, sort of figured out, you can, again, I'm all about flowcharts ahead of time. You can start to put together like a flowchart of responses that you'll use to, well, prevent the enemy from doing that to you. You know, just like be keeping an eye out for like, you know, which, if an enemy showed up from like XYZ spot, you know, like, would it be like catastrophic for me? Just having awareness of those. And again, like, you know, if like that number gets too high and you're like looking, it's like, you know, there's like all of these places like where I could like be getting, you know, shot at from, and I would just have no way to respond or deal with them or even escape, then, you know, you should really be questioning, like, do I actually have control of this position or not? Because if that, you know, once that, like, you know, it implies that, you know, you're making it too easy for enemies to hit shots on you. Now that, like, you understand how to figure out whether you've got control of space, and more importantly, how to protect it, the, I guess, most important thing that's remaining is how to use it and how to help take this advantage that you've now put this work into identifying and protecting to work for you. You're going to use space as a resource to, specifically, like the most common way to use space actually is to surrender and like just, like when you're spending space, like you're always giving it up, right? You're always backing up. And so like you'll sacrifice space in order to heal, right? So it's like you attempt to control the space and the enemy like just, you know, absolutely trashes you and destroys you. So then your response, right, should be to, well, evaluate whether the enemy is going to push you. And, you know, in most situations, like when an enemy's registered big damage on you, a decent enemy that is like of like reasonable skill, like is going to just get on you like very soon, like if not immediately. Oops. So in order to compensate, right, like you're gonna give up space to make sure that you can get off that heal, like I'm about to do right here, right? See, so I'm like giving up. I gave up like probably a lot of space, that probably so much that like you wouldn't even do that unless you were playing Pathfinder and like I'll be able to grapple back after I finish slow healing this, right? But it's like I can't stay there, like considering that I have to like run 5 cells and then probably do a syringe to just be like, you know, like have a reasonable HP total to be able to like actually like make risks, or I'll just like let my teammates do everything, which is probably gonna be easier. But like after this syringe, I'm probably gonna have to get involved, so I'll probably just like use my zipline and grapple. But like as you saw, you know, like I gave up like a lot of space there, you know, because I needed to be able to back up to heal and make sure that the enemies like wouldn't push me like while I was trying to attempt to heal. So that's going to be like one of the most common uses, right? Is just you're going to give up space so that you can heal, because the enemy has to travel that space, right, that you previously controlled and that they were like trying to play around and stay outside of, in order to, you know, be able to get back and apply pressure to you again. The other use that you'll like use space for is to kite squads. And so, oh my god, are you kidding me? Literally getting charge rifled from 2 complete different directions. I don't think like it gets more toxic than that. The other way like you'll spend space is to actually kite enemies. And so the intent here is actually it's like a bait, right? So like you start sacrificing space and giving them more space, the enemy more space to work with the specific intent of like getting them to chase you from their advantaged position in order to be able to like continue shooting you, right? So they like may not have like, you know, established an advantage yet, but you're like giving up the space to like tempt them, right? Because like it's like this is like an enemy squad that for whatever reason just has it out for you, and they like just really want to be engaged with you, probably because like they just feel very confident or whatever in their position, and you're just trying to like break down their position. And so like it's like very common in those situations, you know, to run away. But like you don't just have to straight run away. Like the first thing you can try and do is you can try and spend some of your space. So you like just back up, you let out a little bit of, you just pay out a little bit of your space, like slowly, like a little bit at a time, and you like tempt the enemy with that space, and then they have to follow you from like their ideal position into a different one, like where they're, you know, still able to get shots on you. So for example, right, like we could like potentially catch this person with the repeater coming across the zip line in order to keep shots on us. I mean, I guess we'll just catch them out of the open completely. Or like in this situation, probably trying to think. Yeah, I mean, like right now, like we're like everyone's like kind of like got like pretty strong pieces of cover to the control of like oof, oh my god, that like almost killed me. The control that's like available to squads like between different positions is pretty fixed. And so I'm like just doing this to like give us like more options and mobility so that my teammates don't open a door and get me killed. The whole like notion of kiting like plays around the fact that when you are trying to obtain more space and grab more space to control, then you're actually, generally speaking, the control you have of like the present space around you is weakened, because you're like not really like prepared to shoot at someone, right? Like you're more worried about getting to the next spot. So that like pretty much wraps up everything that I've got, at least right now, for controlling space. Sorry if that's gonna be a little rough. The edits will help, but it's like still gonna be a little rough. But any questions, you know, always comments are a great place to reach me, as well as the Discord, or chat in stream. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and good luck, have fun.